What happens when a journalist, whose voice has steadied a nation through crises, sits opposite a man whose talent once lit up screens but whose words now spark fire? The studio was a crucible, its air thick with the weight of unspoken histories. The set was intimate, a deliberate choice by the producers. Two low-slung armchairs, upholstered in charcoal suede, faced each other across a glass coffee table that caught the studio lights in sharp, fleeting glints. No audience tonight, just the hum of 3 cameras, a wide shot framing the scene, a mid on the guest, and a close on the interviewer. Microphones, clipped to lapels, trailed thin wires that snaked across the floor, their faint drag audible in the quiet moments. Overhead, soft lights buzzed faintly, casting a warm glow that belied the tension brewing below. A chipped porcelain cup, half filled with water, sat untouched on the table, its imperfection a silent witness to the night. Gayle King settled into her chair, her posture erect but easy, her navy blazer crisp against the suede. She adjusted her glasses, a small gesture that steadied her thoughts. A memory flickered, a long-ago interview with a senator, the same chair, the same stakes. She tapped her pen once, twice, against her notepad, the sound a soft metronome in the quiet studio. Across from her sat Mel Gibson, his frame leaner than in his Hollywood heyday, his eyes sharp but guarded. His charcoal suit was tailored, but the top button of his shirt was undone, a faint scar visible just above his collar. The air held the scent of coffee and electronics, a faint tang of ozone from the lights. "Mel, thank you for being here," Gayle began, her voice warm, the cadence of a woman who'd built a career on making the powerful feel safe, before she didn't. "It's been a while since you've done one of these. How are you feeling tonight?" Gibson leaned back, one ankle crossed over his knee, his smile practiced but tight. "Like I'm walking into a lion's den, Gayle," he said, his Australian drawl carrying a hint of defiance. "But I've faced worse." A chuckle, low and brief, escaped him, swallowed by the studio's hush. Camera tight on his left eye, catching the flicker of amusement. The crew exchanged glances behind the cameras. A producer, half hidden in the control room, murmured something into her headset, the sound a faint hiss through the soundproof glass. Gayle smiled, her pen pausing mid-tap. "Let's start easy," she said. "You've been out of the spotlight for a bit. What's life been like for you lately? Family, projects, what's keeping you grounded?" Gibson's fingers twitched against the armrest, a micro-movement, before he answered. "Family's everything," he said, his tone softening, almost convincing. "I've got my kids, my home. I'm working on a couple of films, small, personal stuff. Trying to keep it real, you know?" His gaze flicked to the chipped cup, then back to Gayle. For a moment, his shoulders eased, and something raw flashed across his face, a father, not a star. Wide shot pulls back, capturing the brief softening in his posture. Gayle nodded, her expression empathetic but her eyes sharp. "That's beautiful," she said. "Family's a universal anchor. But you've always been a private man, haven't you? Even with all the public attention over the years." The question hung, deceptively gentle. Gibson's jaw tightened, just enough to notice. "Privacy's not a luxury, Gayle," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "It's a right. You choose what the world gets to see. Anything else is theft." The words landed like a gauntlet, crisp and final. Camera lingers on his hands, one curled into a loose fist. A crew member shifted, the rustle of his jacket audible in the quiet. Gayle tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "That's an interesting way to frame it," she said. "Visibility as theft. But does that mean the public's owed nothing? Even from someone who's shaped culture like you have?" Gibson's laugh was sharp, a bark that didn't reach his eyes. "Owed?" he repeated, leaning forward now, elbows on his knees. "The public gets my work. They get the films, the stories. That's the deal. They don't get to rummage through my soul." His voice carried an edge, a warning, but his eyes darted briefly to the camera, betraying a flicker of unease. Cut to the producer, her phone screen glowing as she types rapidly. Gayle's pen tapped once, a deliberate beat. "Let's talk about that work," she said, her tone still smooth but narrowing, like a lens focusing. Your career, Lethal Weapon, Braveheart, it's iconic. But legacy is a tricky thing. How do you see yours now after the controversies? The headlines? The air shifted, the hum of the lights suddenly louder. Gibson's smile faded, replaced by a hard stare. Legacy's what you make, not what they write, he said, his voice clipped. I've told stories that mattered. People forget that when they're chasing headlines. You know how that game works, Gail. He gestured toward her, a quick flick of his hand, as if passing the question back. Camera catches the glint of his watch, sharp against the soft light. Gail didn't flinch. I do, she said, her voice steady. But the game's changed, hasn't it? The public doesn't just watch anymore, they demand accountability. Some say your past remarks, on faith, on identity, cast a shadow. How do you respond to that? Gibson's fingers tightened on the armrest, the suede creaking faintly. People love a villain, he said, his tone low, almost conspiratorial. They'll twist your words, make you the monster. I said what I said, and I've apologized where I needed to. But I'm not here to grovel for forgiveness I don't owe. His voice rose slightly, the words sharp as a blade. A crew member glances at another, eyebrows raised. Gail leaned forward, her notepad forgotten on her lap. Let's talk about that, she said, her voice still calm but now carrying a moral weight. Apologies are one thing, but accountability, real accountability, means grappling with the harm. You've said privacy is a right, but does that right extend to shielding yourself from the consequences of your words? The studio inhaled, the air taut. Gibson's eyes narrowed, his breath quickening. Consequences? He said, his voice low, dangerous. I've paid plenty, Gail. Lost work, lost friends. You think I don't feel that? You think I don't carry it? For a moment, his voice cracked, a hairline fracture of vulnerability, but he masked it with a tight smile. Camera tight on his face, catching the flicker of pain before it hardens. A whisper from the control room cut through the silence, urgent but muffled. Gail's pen stilled, her gaze unwavering. I hear you, she said, her voice softening, but only just. And I don't doubt you've felt loss. But there's a difference between personal pain and public responsibility. When your words wound, when they target entire communities, doesn't that demand more than a private reckoning? Gibson's hand twitched, his knuckles whitening against the chair. You're framing it like I'm the only one who's ever spoken out of turn, he said, his voice rising, each word a jab. Everyone's got their sins, Gail. Why is it always me under the microscope? Because I'm not afraid to speak my truth? His scar gleamed under the collar, a faint pulse visible in his neck. Wide Shot catches the chipped cup, trembling slightly from the vibration of his voice. The producer's phone screen flashed, a silent storm of notifications. Gail's expression remained composed, but her eyes held a glint of steel. Truth is a powerful word, she said, her voice measured, deliberate. But whose truth matters? When you speak, millions listen. And when those words carry harm, say, about identity, about faith, doesn't that truth come with a cost you're obligated to answer for? The question landed like a stone in still water. Gibson's breath caught, a sharp intake that echoed in the quiet. His chair scraped, a harsh, grating sound against the polished floor. His hand tightened on the armrest, the microphone wire singing faintly as it shifted. The lights hummed, their glare unrelenting. Camera holds on his face, his eyes burning, his jaw set. You're asking me to confess to a crime I didn't commit, he said, his voice low, trembling with barely contained fury. And you're doing it for the cameras. Gail's gaze didn't waver. I'm asking you, she said, her voice clear, unyielding, if you've ever considered that your truth might have broken something bigger than yourself. The studio froze. Gibson's hand clenched, his knuckles stark against the suede. His breath quickened, a ragged edge to it, and the chipped cup rattled faintly on the table. Camera pulls back, the silence deafening, the moment teetering on the edge of collapse. The studio was a held breath, Mel Gibson's knuckles bone-white on the suede chair, his ragged exhales slicing the silence. Gayle King's words, "Your truth might have broken something bigger than yourself," hung like a blade. The chipped porcelain cup rattled faintly on the glass table, its flaw glinting under the studio lights. Camera tight on Gibson's eyes, a storm of fury and fracture. He stood, chair scraping like a gunshot. "We're done," he growled, ripping off his microphone. The wire snapped, landing beside the cup, water trembling inside. Wide shot catches his sharp turn, strides toward the dark. "Mel," Gayle called, her voice steady. "Walking away doesn't answer it." Her pen tapped once, a private anchor. Camera holds her calm, unyielding gaze. "You got your show, Gayle," Gibson shot back, his drawl thick with venom. "Hope it trends." He stormed off, footsteps echoing, the scar above his collar stark under the lights. Cut to the control room, producer's phone buzzes, post already viral. "Gibson walks." The crew exchanged glances, a stagehand shoe squeaking. The chipped cup sat, unmoved, a silent witness. Gayle exhaled, setting her notepad down. "We'll break," she said, voice smooth, though her fingers tightened briefly on the pen. Camera lingers on her hand. Behind the glass, producers scrambled, screens alight with tweets. "King nails Gibson!" "Mel's meltdown!" The lights hummed, their glare relentless. In the corridor, Gibson shoved through a door, its clang swallowed by the concrete walls. The air smelled of bleach and old coffee. His phone buzzed, "Manager. Call now." He ignored it, leaning against the wall, eyes shut. A memory flickered, his daughter's laugh, years ago, soft and unguarded. His jaw clenched, he pushed it away. No weakness now. He straightened, footsteps fading into the dark. Back on set, Gayle stood, smoothing her blazer. A producer approached, whispering, "Social's exploding. You okay?" Gayle nodded, but her eyes flicked to the chipped cup, its crack a mirror to the night. She'd wanted truth, not spectacle, but the line blurred. Camera pulls back, her silhouette against the lights. Hours later, the internet churned. Clips of Gibson's exit racked up millions of views. Posts dissected his words, his scar, his rage. "King exposed him," screamed one. "She ambushed him," cried another. Gayle, at home, scrolled her phone, the blue glow harsh. A text from a friend. "You did your job." But her chest tightened. Had she sought truth or chased a moment? She set the phone down, the question unanswered. Gibson, in a hotel room, watched the same clips, his face shadowed. A bottle of water sat untouched, its surface still. He meant to control the narrative, to reclaim his story, but Gayle's question had cut deeper than he'd admit. Broken something bigger. His fingers traced the scar above his collar, a wound from a life before the cameras. He'd apologized before, rebuilt before. But this felt different, raw, public, final. A call from his daughter blinked on his phone. He didn't answer, but his hand lingered, trembling. The chipped cup left on the set was cleared by a janitor, its imperfection unnoticed in the rush. The studio went dark, but the story didn't. Online, the clash was already legend, a morality play of privilege, pain, and power. Gayle and Gibson, each wounded, each proud, had collided in a moment neither could fully own. The question lingered not just for them but for the millions watching, whose truth held, and whose broke. Final shot, the empty set, the cup gone, the lights cold.